in association with the ITW Global Leaders Forum. So the session that we've got coming up is a keynote panel, Architecting the Network of the Future. And the speakers that we've got here are Emmanuel Rocas, Orange International Carriers CEO, Kerry Gilder, the CEO of Colt Technology Services, Rolf Nafziger, who's the Senior Vice President of Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier, Elisabetta Romano, who's the CEO of Sparkle, and finally, Annabelle Helm, Director of the ITW Global Leaders Forum, who'll be chairing the debate. May you give a warm round of applause as they take to the stage. Thank you very much.
Have you got a microphone, Elisabetta? Have you got a microphone? Okay, good morning and welcome to part 2 of the keynote panel, within which we may touch on the metaverse, but skirt around it too. So my name is Annabelle Helm. I am the director of the Global Leaders Forum. We're a membership organization that represents the international carrier industry. I am delighted to be joined on stage by 4 esteemed leaders within the industry. I know David introduced you, but if you would like to say a few words, let's start at the end, Kerry, and work our way down.
Sure. Hi. Welcome. Glad to see everybody's faces today. I'm Kerry Gilder. I'm the CEO of Colt Technology Services. We're a pan-European provider here in Europe as well as in Asia, and glad to be up here talking to you today.
Hi everybody, happy to be here. I'm Emmanuel Rochas. I'm the CEO of Orange International Carriers, the international carriers, international wholesale arm of the Orange Group.
Hello, Elisabetta Romano. I'm the Sparkle CEO and I got a second job. I'm the head of Italian network from Telecom Italia.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Rolf Nafziger, running Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier business.
Perfect. So let's start with broad strokes. How do we define the network of the future? And let's put this in context. I really liked what Carl said in the previous session, which is what we've done over the last few years is nothing short of magical, right? We should be proud of our achievements, but where do we go next? How do we go? So, Rolf, how are you thinking? And what are your definitions of future network architecture?
Well, I'm not sure if we can define it. We have to build it. And if I talk to our technology guys, they say the future networks, they have a completely different architecture. Yeah? And first of all, they talk about flattening networks. And flattening networks from the technology perspective means, like if you're building fiber, you have much less active components in the network. And with this, it's not only higher bandwidth, but also lower latency. So lower latency comes along with that. Another element is, of course, the softwareization of networks and also the disaggregation. If we think out of a technology perspective, and I'm a commercial guy, but from the technology perspective, a lot of disaggregation is going on when it comes to hardware and software. So in the past, we used to buy black boxes, yeah, where everything was in from a vendor. Today, we buy hard and software differently, which gives us much higher flexibility on the services we are implementing on top of the network, and also higher flexibility when we talk about how are we serving new applications like the metaverse in the future. And it's also, of course, about how are we operating these networks, how can we be adaptable to future trends.
That's interesting. So, Elisabetta, building on that, how are your customer requirements changing? What are they asking you to do? What your networks need to deliver, right?
So I will start first of all from business model. So I think that what we see already and what we are gonna see in the next 10 years, it's a change of the service integrated operators. So first of all, the operators as such will change themselves. I mean, can still be owned by the same owner, but there will be a segmentation, because what we see now as operators and carriers is what was valid 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where the service was voice, and if we think about mobile, was voice and SMS. Now, if we think about what needs to be sold, needs to know from a competence perspective, is cloud, is IoT, is cyber security, it's data, it's a lot of stuff. So I think that this fully integrated model of the operators is showing weakness. And why we know that is showing weakness? Because in the last years, all type of transformation project, to be honest, they failed. Before this job, I was in a vendor side, so I had the privilege to work with operators around the world. Why it was failing? Because we are still thinking about a silos, integrated model, because that's the business model. So we have not decoupled the business model from how we see the things. I think that last month, we were in Copenhagen at Telecom Management Forum. We had a nice meeting regarding the layering. We speak about the layering since many years. Not yet happened, still very much silos, but now it's nailing down more clear the fact that there is infrastructure, then there are services, then there is a platform role, and then there are some verticals on top. And probably that there is one player that can be good at doing all of it, from infrastructure to specific verticals for different industries. It's a bit different because you need completely different skill, competence, different processes. So I think that imagining the operators and the network, so how we used to call it network, looking forward, is really layering this concept. And you can have an infrastructure that maybe expose functionalities directly to the verticals on top. It doesn't mean that, again, you need to go through all these layers in the new business models, but it's important that, we start to layer it, and even if it's part of the same operator, we use modern IT technology like, API layer, even from an internal perspective.
So Manuel, Elizabeth has teed you up very nicely here. When we talk about layers and disaggregation, you've done a huge amount of work on that in Orange. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, actually, I think the network of the future is already being prepared today. What we are doing at Orange is currently we are building a new international network, which is really focused on the keyword that was mentioned by Rolf and Elisabetta, is about disaggregating equipment from the software on the one hand, and disaggregating the different layers from the infrastructure and the network layer, which is fully independent from the services. And the services will be really modular, based on network functions virtualized, that will be used by our service factories to build their own services and to deliver those services in a very timely manner. So we talk about being able to deploy a service in a few days instead of months. So it's really a change in paradigm. So this is going to be a reality in 2023 already, and this network will really coming back to the latency that was mentioned by Rolf. It will be able to deliver a very short latency. We talk about 10 milliseconds for 80% of our customers, 5 milliseconds to any cloud. So this is really a powerful platform to build the services of the future.
And Carrie, how are you thinking about the networks of the future? Let's go back to the beginning. Set the scene for us. Well, what are you doing at Colt?
So I think first and foremost, we have to think about what's happening from a macroeconomic perspective in the world. geopolitical environment is highly complex. It's getting worse. There will be fractionalization that happens in Europe. If you look at the energy crisis that we're currently in, that's going to be completely at the forefront. In the UK here, we have 20% decrease in the amount of energy that's required to supply the overall demand. So even if the government puts in subsidies, that's actually only going to increase demand. So we're going to have future problems around that. So energy, like Elisabetta said, is going to be a currency. It's going to be a problem, and we have to absolutely make sure that we're looking at that, first and foremost. But the second thing we have to be looking at that hasn't been mentioned yet is security. Because with geopolitical environment, the fractionalization, of the West, the East, even within the EU, that is going to be front and center. But most importantly, it's climate. And I think we dismiss that sometimes here in the, in the networking environment, but we are the ones that are enabling the connections around the world while these severe weather events are happening. And in the last 20 years, there's been an 83% increase in severe weather events. And that's going to only continue. So it will continue to affect our food supply, it will continue to affect our energy supply, and it will force mass migrations of people over the next 70 years to where the planet is uninhabitable. By 1% today, it'll be 19% by 2070. So I think what we need in our networks to enable the connection to the future is an on-demand consumption-based environment that's highly flexible and enables the connectivity wherever, whenever, and however you need it.
Thank you. So moving from climate change, we're not going to tackle that today, but going back to that flexibility, that zero-touch future, how are you thinking about zero touch when it comes to network provisioning? How far away is that future? Rolf?
I think it's very close. Not very close when we look into the traditional operator system with all the legacies that we are facing. But if I look at the hyperscalers and the WAN cloud they launched this year, where everything is based on self-ordering, self-provisioning, it's real global scale, highly automized, a strict softwareization behind, clear cloudification. I must say there is something around the corner, and for me it's inspiring and worrying at the same time. Because we, in the traditional operator model, we will be competing to that, and that's why we have to catch up and we have to optimize our networks. And we are, of course, global operators, but not really without the help of other operators. So we have to optimize our network borders, and we have to accelerate on that with high speed. And you know that we are working on blockchain, on MEF APIs, all that, but we have to significantly accelerate our interoperability of networks. And this is now not a matter of years, but rather a matter of months where we have to make progress here.
And how are you thinking about that, Elisabetta? Creating the global network, right? Sounds great. How do we do that? Well, what are the steps to get there?
So I think that leveraging on what Rolf is saying, of course, interoperability, standardize things, and being, and creating interoperability is a must, because if we want to have, things on the fly, even ourselves, customers that are self-ordering things, self-buying things, and so on, then we need to, work as a global network. We always say that even, despite how big we are, we cannot be all over, so we must work together, and the only way to work together is, through standardization and interoperability program. So I think this is important, and at the same time, so it's what we call the East-West, collaboration and API, and it's right, there is a lot of things that are happening, because sometimes we tend to be very pessimistic on where we are. So things has been happened, And so what Rolf was referring, so there has been a lot of work when it comes to MEF API from the business process perspective. There has been activities done, between Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Colt, regarding, fixing issue, like wrong invoice and so on. So I think that there are initiatives that are very good. What is important that happens is to scale up, that everyone in this industry needs to feel the sense of urgency. So there is a sense of urgency because the others are not waiting for us. No? So what the OTT are doing are not there waiting for us. So we must be fast in order to, having this collaboration and cooperation and interoperability works at the scale in order that, we can be easy to work with at the global scale.
And that's interesting, right? So the point is we need to get the basics right. And we're not all the same. We don't have the same inventory, invoicing. We saw an amazing demo of the DLT platform that C-Ban is working on yesterday at the board meeting. There's loads of other initiatives like that that's driving internal operational transformation, but that costs money, it takes time. How are you thinking about that, Emmanuel? Is that something that you're focused on within Orange?
I guess that I fully agree with what Elisabeth has just said. We just need to feel the sense of urgency of doing that, because, of course, this is our role and historically is to interconnect together and to interconnect systems which are heterogeneous. So that's what we do, and that we do well in the past. But now we need to do it faster, and we need to do it more globally, because this is what is driving the digital transformation of the world is cloud, and cloud is global, and cloud is fast, cloud is simple. So this is what we need. Is we don't need to change the role which is ours, but we need to do it faster. And to do it faster, we really need indeed to automate, to interface with more standard APIs and standard systems. We need to do it with our own roadmap, but we need to do it. And I hear sometimes that we say that if we go to this network as a service model, this is creating a basis for more commoditization of connectivity, and that is true. That's true, but and we need to find, at the same time we build this connectivity as a service, we need to define what will be our value tomorrow, but we cannot wait for having this value proposition to build the basics. And so the paradox we have is that we need to take the risk of commoditization if we want to remain relevant and don't repeat the history of voice and RCS that we have all seen in the past, where we have lost our relevance and we have left to other players the role of building those new ways of communicating.
Right, we're fantastic at creating value. We're not so great at capturing that, retaining that. So commoditization, scary word. But Carrie, how are you thinking about this? Is this global network where you're placing your bets?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. I think that we went through an era of giving value away, and now it's our time to bring value back. I think that we can create hyperscale with what my three colleagues up here just talked about, which is creating an environment, a network where we actually have open inventory, that we allow the visualization via APIs and blockchain and other next generation technologies to actually enter into each other's environment in such a way where we can create global scale in a different, way than what we have done before. I think at the end of the day, the technology is actually there. If you look at Colt's network, we have 225 on-demand cloud on-ramps. We have universal CPE that already has compute power on it. We're working with IBM in order to actually create the edge on that universal CPE, and we've been deploying that for over 5 years. We have on-demand, at over 1,000 locations, across the world, where it doesn't take days or months. It actually takes 3 minutes to turn up a network service. And that's where we have to get to, is this environment that is truly on demand, truly consumption-based, enabled by zero-touch provisioning technologies, where we don't have the sins of the past from voice, as Emmanuel said, in regard to the commercial constructs of the business. And I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. The technology is there. It's a behavioral, a mental, and a commercial change that has to exist in order for us to realize value.
And this question about value, right, how do we capture it? I mean, we're not going to figure it out here because it's a debate, it will evolve, but where are you thinking? Because collaboration, commoditization, but let's not create an edge that we lose again, right? So how do we do that as an industry? Where are we and should we be placing our bets from an edge perspective? Anyone like to take that, Rolf? You're nodding.
I can answer initially. So I think the edge is already there. You heard in the last panel what they said is actually this is where the service providers have an advantage, because we actually own the real estate. If you look at the central offices that are out there, there's thousands, if not millions of them around the world. That is the edge. So, it's a question of the definition of what edge is, as Jezebel said in the last panel. I think you can define it in many different ways. And this is where I think we have an advantage. Again, it's just a matter of collaborating and actually enabling the storage, the compute, the cloud, and the connectivity to be realized in a location that's actually closer to the end user.
Let me, elaborate on this, because it's true, the edge, this definition of edge is just trying to move closer to, the one that will use the application, if it's a person, if it's not human. The point is that we already have edge, no? Because if something is not centralized and distributed, so the CDN of before, the caching, bringing caching was the first example of edge, because they were moving the content provider content closer to the end user to have a better experience. So, but what went wrong? And in that case, the caching was in our network. So what did it go wrong? Because in that case, we had the real estate, we had the place where to put it, but we didn't get any money out of it. So, all these software from all the content provider are in our networks, and the model went wrong. So now the real matters is what we are going to do it for the further edge. Because there will be further edge for the low latencies use cases. If we think about Web 3.0, the metaverse, there will be further need of going, closer to the end user. Yes, again, we have opportunities because we have central office, we have whatever, mobile sites, but then it's important that we understand, we agree in the industry from a business model perspective, how we want to act now, with the players that wants to leverage on our proximity, our capillarity, and the distributed network. So that is really the question we need to answer as an industry and all the players that are here.
Yeah, I personally think that at some point in time we need to redefine the edge, because to whomever I talk has a different definition of the edge. It all started with low latency, and then of course latency in the US network was a different problem than in a German network. And we also know that just for low latency there are different elements how to reduce latency as well. So I think, Elisabetta, what you said, I think it's very much now also in the context of the use cases that we have, where we are moving more and more the content to a contextual environment of our users. And then, of course, it makes sense not to have everything very central, but more decentral, as close to the user as possible. And I think this will be more or less the future definition also of edge. Also regarding to the metaverse, where will be various things. Of course, low latency is key also for the metaverse, but there will be highly complex contextual use cases, and this you can much better provide from the edge than from a more central data center.
Perfect. So from the edge, right, it doesn't really matter where it is for the end user. They just want fast, reliable, secure, flexible, dialing up, dialing down, bandwidth, whatever it is, right? And the one thing we do know is, and we had this conversation yesterday, if your Oculus headset stops working, it's not Oculus that's going to get the stick. It's not Meta that's going to get the stick. It's the networks, right? So how do we do that, and how do we plan investments now that the edge can be wherever the service is required, right? So how do we do that?
Yeah, I think the question we have is to answer is not to guarantee the quality between the edge, and that was a discussion we had last week, but really to from the end user to the end user, and the edge will not be in the hands of the end user for every application. And we see, for example, you were mentioning metaverse, Rolf. Metaverse is clearly the intelligence will be in the edge, but we need to guarantee the experience until the end user. So really we need to think our networks already now to be able to monitor the quality of service, but also to deliver quality of service on demand, because every application will not need the same level of quality. And for sure, we have the capacities in our networks, or we will have to be able to manage the quality based on a per user, on a per usage, on a per service mode. And this is something where we need to invest right now.
So I'm hoping we're going to have the Slido on the screen. Do have a think about what questions you might be wanting to ask the panel. There will be time, I make sure of that. So moving from the edge to investment priorities, right? So it takes money, and how do we monetize that? How do we recoup our investment? How do we capture that value? I mean, it's the question, especially to set the macroeconomic scene here. I mean, capital's expensive. It's going to get more expensive. Interest rates are going up. How is that going to impact the deployment of new technologies, new networks? Kerry, I'll come to you first on this.
So I do think what we're going to see is a slowdown in capital investment, especially from private equity, as we move into a more recessive environment, over the next couple of years, and the interest rates go from where they are today to, on the upwards of 9% is what the expectations are by the middle of next year. So that will prohibit the amount of debt that can be acquired in order to enable capital to go out into the networks. My strong philosophy is that we don't have a lack of capital in this industry. We have a lack of collaboration. And I think that what we need to be looking at is the ability to utilize capital that is coming from various parts of the industry, whether that be towers, data centers, in our case fiber, and actually working with one another in order to have different commercial agreements, such as rev share, co-building, et cetera, in order to enable the maximization of the capital investment. And if we do that, then I think we won't suffer from the environment that we had 10, 15 years ago, where actually we had an oversupply of infrastructure and we had an under demand, and that's where some value was lost as well. So I think it's really around thinking outside of the box as far as how we work together in order to maximize capital investment and possibly, co-build and co-deliver services where and when we've never done it before.
Is this something you're thinking about as well, Elisabetta? Co-build, co-share?
No, I mean, the openness on the business model, again, it's fundamental. So operators normally has been very much working on more on isolation. So that, I mean, partnership, real partnership, we have not been open enough, but I think that is over. So we see things are changing. I think that more than the issue of the capex of the investment is again an issue of monetization, because if we are able to get the money we deserve, then we can still invest. Because the issue is that now, because our EBITDA is going down, and then we have the amortization of all the capital investment done. If the EBITDA is going down, then of course your EBIT is going further down. So the issue is again a way to understand how we can monetize better what we are doing. Emmanuel was talking about quality of services, because it's correct that there is edge, and still is something we need to discuss, but then there is a lot of requests for things on demand, on the fly, and changing things that is really up to us. We are the one that we can deliver this, despite what is on top of the network. So we need to make it working, and we need to be sure that we get monetization out of it. So that is important, because bottom line exists if top line exists. So we must work as an industry, working better together, so to collaborate and to be seen, to be easy to work with from the others. But, the asset and the value we have it, that is the distribution, the capillarity, the quality of services. I mean, we can mention some of them. Now, we must do something to monetize, because these were already capabilities already, clear 20 years ago. But at the end, we have not even been able to make it as a product. No? Quality of service, I mean, is not a product. So we must do the effort to make it as a product, or the network as a service to make it a reality. Because in that case, if it becomes a product, then you can sell it and you can monetize it. If it's all, integrated in our a bit, spaghetti architecture, I'm Italian, I can say, still very much on stovepipes and so on, then it's difficult even, for us to make it clear and to expose and to make it a product.
Yeah, if I may add to that, Elisabetta, I think it's always important that when we talk about monetization, it starts from the customer perspective, and it starts with the customer. And when I think about the disaggregation that we mentioned at the beginning on the technology side, this disaggregation also has to happen on the customer side, because we are coming from a logic in the telco business where we were forcing our customers into a certain kind of bundled services. We are only selling voice with access. Yeah, now we have a kind of mind shift with all that we have learned also from the implementation of SD-WAN, where you always think about an underlay and an overlay. There's already also a disaggregation taking place. We have to do the same on the service side. To give you an example, we were at the beginning of the implementation of TV, of Magenta TV in Germany, we were bundling this also with our access. Today, you can also just buy the Magenta TV, buy a stick, and watch Magenta TV also on a Vodafone network. So this is, of course, giving a completely different way of monetization to our assets, and also different freedom to our customers, where we can scale on the overlay while we might lose in some cases in the bundled thinking that maybe anyhow thinking and logic of the past.
And that's interesting, because that's a whole culture shift, right, for us as an industry. How are you thinking about this? Disaggregating customer bundles sounds terrifying, but could engender more loyalty, new revenue streams. Is this something that you're looking at Sparkle, at Orange?
Yeah, the service model of tomorrow will probably be a more modular, disaggregated. I don't know if it is the right word. And probably also, as we talk about aggregating networks, we will probably have to think about more aggregation of services, aggregation of content. The value of the customer relationship is really an asset for us as telcos, and we need to leverage. We've tried to do it in the past, but this is really key for tomorrow. Is really to be able to leverage this relationship, our go-to-markets with these customers, and increase, I would say, the scope of what we offer to them and the modularity of what we offer to them.
Carrie, would you like to add to that? No? No. So from the audience, I feel like you guys are in a slightly pessimistic mood, judging by these questions. Supply chain and geopolitics, two very difficult questions. But if we look at supply chain issues, let's tackle this first. How is that impacting your network deployment in the short to medium term, right? We've discussed power, but what else is there going on from a supply chain perspective? Let's start with you, Carrie.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to this. So I see many vendors in the room. I know that you've been suffering for the last couple of years, and we've been suffering with you. It still exists. It's going to exist for, I believe, through at least 2024. And I think that, again, this comes down to the reality of how we actually use equipment, where we use equipment, and how we can work together. Because I think, we have an energy crisis, we have a supply chain crisis, we don't know what's going to happen with the geopolitical environment in Taiwan. And we also know that chip fabs don't just mysteriously appear. It takes years to actually develop these in other parts of the world. So until those are actually developed, we are going to suffer from supply chain shortages. And I think that's just a reality. So as that happens, once again, how can we collaborate together to ensure that we're meeting the demands of our customers? And ultimately, that's what matters in this race, in this game. And I think there's ways to do it, but we have to get creative.
And on geopolitics, would anybody like to tackle this, right? And it's difficult because it's in our DNA to be interoperable. Keeping the world connected is the GLF hashtag. Do you see a world where there will be fragmentation from the networks? And how do we manage that within the context of this single global network, which is where we started? Would anyone like to tackle that?
I'll take it again if nobody wants to. Listen, it's in this setting, I think we pride ourselves as being multicultural by having an environment where we embrace everybody. We are a highly inclusive industry. So when the geopolitical environment creates an environment that fragments, the world, and more importantly, requires us to disconnect where we were once connected, I think it becomes very painful for us as operators. We see this with Ukraine right now, and having to actually create environments that enable the roaming. I know all of us up here on this stage have provided free services for the last many months to Ukrainians coming back and forth across the border to enable those critical connections, and we'll continue to do that. So I think we just have to keep an open mind as to how to keep the world connected and be the one that is the glue that possibly creates that fair, that global environment, that universal place that doesn't see the politics, doesn't see, the race, the color, the ethnicity, the part of the world that you come from, and enable those connections to happen. That being said, I'm also a businesswoman, and I have to run my business. And so at the end of the day, I think security comes into play in a big way. And we will start seeing environments where we absolutely have to have the ability to shut parts of our network down on a given day, on a given time, in order to, respond to the geopolitical dynamics around the world. So I think, we are going to have demarcation points that are created because of geopolitical environment going forward.
I personally think that in this context of this geopolitical crisis, I think we should also be a little bit proud of our industry. We often think, we are lagging behind, we are slow. As if we're looking into the Corona crisis, I think each and every carrier was able to really deal with this crisis immediately, within days. We as Deutsche Telekom, we were upscaling our networks, we were seeing where do we need new capacity due to home working. This went really under this pressure within days, and across borders. Then Ukraine war came up. I must say I was really concerned about, we have many refugees from Ukraine in our footprint, a lot of roaming, free roaming offers into these networks. The same happened. We were able to scale up our networks within days. There were also attacks on the networks within Ukraine. This was also fixed within days. So I think in our industry we really have capabilities to be flexible, fast, and very decisive if there's a crisis. I'm a little bit more concerned about this hybrid war that is now coming up somehow, where there might be more direct attacks on critical infrastructure. But I think with the learnings we have, we will also be able to deal with that.
Right, and you saw that in Germany week before last, where the Bahn network was cut in multiple places in the middle of nowhere. How do we war game those situations if critical infrastructure is increasingly targeted?
But also I think that this is more, from a values perspective now. Our values is always to connect the words, connect people and so on. So I think that, if I think about, my personal value, then, there has been part of the world with the issue, because, now is Ukraine, we had Venezuela that had the issue, with a lot of sanctions and so on. But I speak on behalf of Sparkle. We have been always keep delivering the services, even if we were having issue to get the money out. Because I think that the network is there to connect people, and especially in the moment where there are issues that we cannot really understand and believe, that is the moment where our infrastructure needs to have, even stronger mission. That's, we need to connect people and let people know what is happening around the world. So I would say that even further, we need to stay together and have the network working all over the place, because that is having a democratic world, and that's having everyone access to the information. So I really think, after so many years in this industry, that was, the mission when I started in the industry. That was really the idea I liked about working in a telco, and that is still the same idea.
And thank you for bringing us back to that magical place where we started, where what we do. And I really like this question on the board here, which is, how can the GLF or other independent bodies help create a platform to deliver true collaboration? Elisabetta, you are the chair of the GLF, where we're all represented. How do you think we can collaborate to change the environment for all of us?
Yeah, I think yesterday we had a meeting. I think that was a good meeting, because we are, defining a framework of our Tomorrow of Telco network, but starting from very pragmatic and, things to be done now, because we need to fix the basic now, and looking at the target architecture and target vision. So we have a target, but then we need to fix it. And yesterday, for example, there was these activities done together with the MEF regarding the API that has been, taking the Telecom Management Forum API standard and customized for our needs. So I think that has been demonstrated that from a business process perspective, things has been done. Then again, from a CBAN framework, the case of the settlement, also very innovative things. So I think that all these activities are within a frame looking at the tomorrow network, and but solving issue now, so solving problem now. I think that is an easy path for us. And like we were saying before, being so many people in the board and representing so important operators and carriers, And starting from good example, best practice, having the others, join these good cases. So that's what we need to do in order to industrialize the best practice that will move from here to the new vision.
I think we have a major challenge here, is because we know that our industry is organized with those bodies, standardized bodies, industry bodies, leaders, global leaders forum, and this has worked in the past, and we have demonstrated our ability to collaborate, to standardize, and to bring new things in the market. But the question now is really about the speed, and we have shared the urgency, and that was one of the discussion we had yesterday in the GLF, is how do we get to speed? How do we accelerate our rhythm? We all know that standardization in the telecom is a long process, and so how can we fast track and bring the steps that are needed to accelerate the market, the industry transformation? That's our challenge.
Would you agree with that, Rolf? Speed is of the essence.
Yeah, speed is key, and of course speed in alignment across the industry is of course very difficult. Yeah, all operators have different steerings, different strategies, but I must say we discussed this throughout the year between Emmanuel, Kerry, Elisabetta, myself, and many others in the GLF. And I must say we are really making here great progress, Elisabetta. And the topics you mentioned yesterday, what we are defining here is not a big alliance with very complex body. We are defining the alliances of the willing. What means that we are bringing 1 or 2, 3, 4 operators together who are really decisive to work into one direction. And the blockchain topic is one very good example. I also see a couple of colleagues in the room who presented yesterday in the GLF, which was extremely convincing with a lot of passion. 5, 6, 7, 8 colleagues from 4 different operators called, was there Vodafone, PCCW and Telecom, and it was really, everybody could see it's not a top-down thing, it's a bottom-up thing, because our people are seeing this is a necessity and the benefit for them and their work is really, really high. And this gives me confidence that more and more carriers are joining that alliance of the willing. It will grow, create a big gravity in the end, and we are then building up a de facto standard that will work.
And you're right, that was very powerful, the presentation yesterday, and I think there's going to be many sign-ups to the DLT invoicing platform within CVAN. And I think for me, it's not just collaboration across you between carriers, it's the GLF needs to collaborate with i3 Forum, with MEF, with CBAN, with all of these other bodies to ensure that there is a holistic view and we are aligned, or at least we all have a similar goal that we're aiming for, right? So it's not just on you, it is also on me. I'm going to take you to the end now, and let's finish with some lovely sound bites. We all like a good sound bite. So if you were to distill your network transformation strategies, your view of the future into 3 words, what would they be? Rolf, let's start with you.
I only need 2 words, is that okay?
You can have 2.
Cloudification and automation.
Elisabetta.
Yeah, I would say that automation, of course, but then it's assurance. I think that we have a big issue with assurance, and it's nice when we speak with people coming from the software that it's easy to do predictive, proactive, and so on. Try to have a fiber that is cut, and then proactivity and predictability and whatever. It's really a topic.
Manuel.
I would say digital, partnerships, and talents.
Nice. Harry.
I'd say wherever, whenever, and however. We put the power of the digital universe in the hands of our customers, wherever, whenever, and however they need it.
Perfect. So with that, and 28 seconds left on the clock, I will say thank you all. It's been a fantastic conversation, and thanks to all of you for watching.
Thank you ever so much there to the panelists there as well for that really engaging panel session. So we'll just bring us on to the next presentation session before we break for lunch. Please also use Slido to submit any audience questions using the hashtag Capacity Europe. The next session taking place is presentation, Keeping Ukrainian Internet Running. We just want to say a big thank you